Imagine a 21-year-old with no degree, no wealthy family behind him, and no connections, just a failing record shop and a criminal idea. He got arrested. He spent a night in jail. His parents had to mortgage their house to save him. By all accounts, it should have been the end. Instead, it was the beginning. By the time he was 50, he owned a private Caribbean island, a record label, an airline, and had sent people to space. This is the story of how one illegal loophole became the foundation of a multi-billion-dollar empire. Meet Richard Branson. Born in 1950 in Surrey, England, Branson was never a conventional success story. He was dyslexic, struggled in school, and dropped out at 16. His headmaster repeatedly told him he'd either end up in prison or become a millionaire. Turns out, both were right. He launched a student magazine at 16, then a mail-order record company at 19. He called it Virgin because he and his friends were all new to business. He was scrappy, restless, and hungry, and by his early 20s, he had a small record shop in London. A big dream, and a serious problem. The competition was beating him on price, and he couldn't figure out how to win. Until he did, by cheating. Britain in the early 1970s was expensive. A hefty purchase tax of 33% was slapped on records, which jacked up prices for everyone. But Branson saw an opportunity. If he could sell records cheaper than the big high street stores, he'd win. But to beat their prices legitimately, he'd have to take a loss. So he didn't do it legitimately. The plan was bold and simple. Pretend to export his records overseas to avoid the tax, then secretly sell them back into the UK. No tax meant no 33% markup, an instant discount. Branson's shop undercut every competitor around, and sales exploded. He was 19 and making more money than he'd ever seen in his entire life. The mechanics were straightforward. Exported goods didn't incur the tax. Branson fraudulently obtained export documents for shipments of records that never actually left England. He pocketed the tax savings and used them to undercut every rival on the market.
Virgin Records is helping hundreds and hundreds young people throughout the country to get records at about 6 shillings cheaper than, or 6 to 8 shillings cheaper than they would anywhere else. At the same time, it's also starting up new groups who, have been scorned by some of the big companies, and we're listening to their records and give them a chance to get going themselves.
It was easy money until the authorities noticed. By 1971, customs officials grew suspicious of Virgin's suspiciously low prices, so they set up a sting operation. Investigators marked Branson's export-only records with invisible ink, then went out and bought those exact same records in UK shops. The trap was sprung. However, Branson reportedly got a tip off an anonymous source. In a late-night panic, he scrambled to cover his tracks, dumping records, destroying paperwork, anything to erase the evidence. But it wasn't enough. The next morning, customs officers knocked on the door. He was caught red-handed. Branson was arrested and spent a night in jail for tax evasion. One day he's a cocky young entrepreneur riding high, and the next, he's in a cold cell, wondering if everything he's built is about to collapse. He later called it the worst night of his life. To avoid a criminal trial, he struck a deal. He agreed to repay all the dodged taxes, plus a significant fine, a total bill of around £70,000. For a young man in a record shop, that was a devastating sum. He didn't have it, so his parents remortgaged their family home to bail him out. It was humbling, frightening, and deeply embarrassing. But Branson took the hit, paid the fine, and made himself a private vow. He'd stay on the right side of the law from now on, but he'd still use every advantage he could find. No more illegal scams. Next time, he'd find a legal loophole. Amazingly, the scandal didn't destroy him, it clarified him. By 1972, Branson used what remained of his earnings to launch Virgin Records as a proper record label. He signed unknown artists nobody else would touch, and the label thrived. Then came Virgin Airlines, then Virgin Mobile, then Virgin Galactic. The brand he'd almost torched in a tax fraud became one of the most recognised names on earth. But behind the scenes, Branson never forgot the real lesson of that arrest. The system has gaps, and the people who find them get rich. He stayed within the law, but he worked it relentlessly, structuring the Virgin Empire through a maze of offshore companies and trusts designed to shield as much profit as possible from the taxman. But Branson's most audacious move was still yet to come. In 1992, he faced a gut-wrenching decision. His airline, Virgin Atlantic, was hemorrhaging money. To save it, he had to sell the thing he loved most, his record label. In a blockbuster deal, Branson sold Virgin Music Group to Thorn EMI for a staggering £560 million, one of the biggest music deals in history. But the real shock came later, when people found out Richard Branson paid zero tax on the sale. But how? Well, he had structured the deal through offshore tax havens. The £229 million capital gain was routed through Jersey and Guernsey, Channel Islands, just off the shore of the UK, known for their near zero tax rates. By doing so, he legally avoided a £92 million UK tax bill. £92 million that would have gone to public services, schools, and hospitals, quietly deposited in Branson's account instead. British lawmakers were furious. Parliament was reportedly shocked that someone could pocket £250 million and pay nothing. 56 members of the Parliament signed a motion condemning the loophole and calling for it to be closed. To the public, Branson was a national hero, a knighted entrepreneur with a golden touch, but behind closed doors, he'd played the system brilliantly, and most people didn't even realise until it was done. That untaxed windfall became the lifeline for Virgin Atlantic. The man who'd once smuggled records past customs had grown into a billionaire who could move hundreds of millions past the tax authorities without getting his hands dirty and without breaking a single law. As the Virgin Empire expanded into trains, mobile phones, and space travel, Branson continued to structure things in his favour. Assets moved offshore, family trusts accumulated, and then, in 2007, came the final move. Sir Richard Branson quietly relocated his primary residence to the Necker Island, his private island in the British Virgin Islands. Officially, he said it was for the climate and his health, but unofficially, it made him a tax exile. By spending most of the year outside the UK, he saved himself millions more in taxes. He openly admitted as much in 2013, acknowledging that leaving British residency had been financially significant. This did not go down well at home. Politicians questioned why a British knight wasn't contributing to British coffers. By 2016, a shadow councillor was suggesting his knighthood should be reconsidered for effectively turning his back on the country that made him. The press started calling him out as someone who'd wrapped himself in the Union Jack when launching businesses or doing charity stunts, but disappeared when it came time to pay the bill. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Branson's story isn't just about one man, it's a window into how the game of wealth actually works. From the moment he fraudulently dodged a 33% record tax as a teenager, right through to writing $250 million through the Channel Islands as a billionaire, Branson understood something most people don't. The rules aren't the same for everyone, because not everyone knows what the rules actually are. This isn't an endorsement of fraud or aggressive tax avoidance. It's a call to be clear-eyed about how the world works. Today, Richard Branson is worth somewhere north of $2.5 billion. He owns Necker Island, his personal paradise in the Caribbean. He's launched rockets into space. He's been knighted. He turned a record shop conviction into a global empire spanning over 40 countries. It started with a loophole, a stupid, brilliant, illegal loophole exploited by a teenager who didn't want to pay 33% on records. That one decision, and everything he learned from almost losing it all, shaped a mindset that made him one of the most successful businessmen of the 20th century.